Good afternoon and welcome to Spectrum Television News at 12. I am Uyai MM, come to you live from Uyo, the Akwa State capital. Let's take a look at the major stories. Federal government moves to fast-track trial of 5,000 insurgents. Court orders Inec to recognize Nenadi Usman-Led Labour Party Caretaker Committee. In other news, President Trump demands immediate Greenland talks, rules out force. We'll bring you the details of these stories and more in a moment. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. We begin the news at noon from the national scene, where about 5,000 individuals suspected of involvement in terrorism-related activities are currently being held in pre-trial detention facilities across the country. The large number of detainees has created a significant backlog of terrorism cases. This was contained in the 2025 to 2030 strategic plan of the National Counter-Terrorism Center, a copy of which was obtained by reporters on Wednesday. The NCTC disclosed that its legal team, working with the Defense Headquarters and the Federal Ministry of Justice, has been reviewing the files to fast-track prosecutions or dismiss cases lacking sufficient evidence. Meanwhile, the federal government has announced plans to abolish the long-standing higher national diploma HND dichotomy by empowering polytechnics to award degrees. In a major reform aimed at repositioning technical and vocational education as a driver of national development, the Minister of Education, Dr. Tunji Alausa, disclosed this in Abuja yesterday while addressing a high-level retreat of council chairmen, commissioners of education, rectors, registrars and bursars. Describing the move as a landmark policy shift, the minister said it would end decades of discrimination against polytechnic graduates and elevate polytechnics into centers of excellence within Nigeria's higher This will reposition polytechnic education within Nigeria's higher education system, said Alausa. According to him, the reform will place polytechnic education on a stronger footing while preserving its core strength in hands-on, industry-focused training. On judicial matters, the Federal High Court in Abuja today sacked Julius Abure as national chairman of the Labour Party and ordered the Independent National Electoral Commission to recognize the Caretaker Committee led by Senator Nenadi Usman pending the conduct of the party's national convention. Justice Peter Lifu, who delivered the judgment, held that Abure's tenure as national chairman had elapsed. The judge ruled that the Usman-Led Caretaker Committee remained the only valid authority to act for and represent the Labour Party, relying on the subsisting position of the Supreme Court on the party's leadership crisis. Justice Lufu dismissed Abure's contention that the matter was an internal party affair and therefore non-justiciable, holding that the constitution of the Caretaker Committee was necessitated by the Supreme Court's judgment. In another development, Governor Basani of Kaduna State has promised that his administration, in collaboration with security agencies, will ensure the safe and speedy return of all those who were abducted in Komin-Wali village last Sunday. The governor, who made the pledge on Wednesday when he led a large delegation of senior government officials and heads of security agencies to commiserate with the people of Komin-Wali, said that he will not rest on his oars until all the abducted persons are returned home safely. He reiterated that the number of those who were kidnapped does not matter, adding that whether it was one person that was abducted or 100 people, that it was the responsibility of Kaduna State government to protect the lives and property of the people. Meanwhile, Kwara State Governor Abdurrahman Abdurrazak has established a 3-member committee to investigate the causes of the recent student protest at Kwara State Polytechnic. The panel is chaired by the State Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice, Ibrahim Suleiman. Other members include the Commissioner for Environment, Nafisat Bogi, and the Permanent Secretary, Service Welfare, Mercy Olufunke Shitu. The committee has been given 2 weeks to submit its findings. Its terms of reference include investigating both the remote and immediate causes of the protest and how it was handled, recommending measures to prevent similar incidents in the future, and proposing strategies for the growth and development of the institution. Back here, the managing director of Guard Post Farms along Airport Road in Akwa Ibom State, Ibanga Isine, has raised an alarm over the alleged destruction of farmlands by cattle, calling on the government to strengthen enforcement of the anti-open grazing law. A correspondent completes the story.
On January 8, around 12 p.m., Ibanga Isine, the managing director of Guard-Post Farms along Airport Road, said his crops were almost destroyed when 30 to 40 cattle entered his farmland. He told Spectrum TV that efforts to chase the animals away led to a confrontation with the herder, during which he attempted to stop the incursion. Few minutes later, the herder gave a signal to the cows and they all went away. The farmer later reported the incident at the Dakada Police Division and the Anti-Grazing Task Force, saying he expects the herder to be identified and held accountable, also adding that he would do everything possible to make sure that this doesn't repeat itself again, not just for him, but other farmers who have complained about these incidents in the past.
Herders have been bringing their cattle once in a while into these premises and destroying our crops. On the 8th, I heard the farm supervisor calling me, the voice with so much urgency, so I rushed down there, and by the time I got there, the cows had already invaded, breached the perimeter fence, and then came into the farm and they were eating plantains. So I didn't see the herder. There were over 14 cows. I can't even count because there were so many. I have a picture. I made a report at the Dakada police station. They have not been able to identify the herder because I want to prosecute that herder. He had no right to come into my property to threaten me, and this thing has been happening a lot around this environment and across the state. Women who plant cassava don't harvest those crops. If we have to produce food in Akwa Ibom State, then the menace of Fulani herdsmen and their cattle should be stopped. The government should do something urgently, because if they could do that blatantly in broad daylight to me in my farm, then there's nothing they will do in the village. What they're doing in the villages are, this is just a child's play.
When asked about the anti-grazing law in the state, Alhaji Mohammed, leader of cattle dealers in Akwa Ibom State and a member of the Anti-Open Grazing Task Force, said the state anti-grazing law is yet to be fully enforced. He explained that the task force is currently empowered to act only after farmlands have been damaged and not to stop herders while they are on the move. According to him, investigations are ongoing to identify the owners of the cattle involved. Alhaji Mohammed added that once identified, the herders will be warned to stay away from the affected area and any damage caused will be paid for. He noted that arrests have been made in similar cases in the past and that the incident has significantly reduced between 2024 and 2025. He assured residents that the task force would do its best to ensure such incidents do not occur again. Meanwhile, other farmers in the area complained bitterly about the repeated encroachment by herders and cows and how their crops have been destroyed in past incidents. They called on the state government to strengthen enforcement measures to protect farmlands and prevent further losses. They further called on the owners and the dealers of the animals to provide ranches for their cows.
Usara fa ita ita bon song spray po aminda dan kure umianga nanke o kan iso de mako atotori aminda nse nkutegu si igbeme enam efro erwo nwam eto eta okom se di ta ngbo na destroy mpo enwa eto if se vi nwa aminto agwe na se ebo boko iwa agbobono no ena ata government ena ngbo eba aken wonye na amo ebene na amo no ka gasin ke ikoromo enu anu abok ida se bene kamari ka ge destroy mpo inwa wo
aru moy mai mini na ngaru moy sane na ngaru ya ki control ge na ngaru esane ya eno ena ngaru do inwa de usene do nda ngaru ntom bo nam boy na ngaru do inwa abian bo na sen dan ju mu yin kate ada ngaru di do inwa ngene do biat boy bu kom ari do nganga itakero di destroying bo before yedi dedi ni na ngaru ma ro up to 5 Mayum ya government is in boy bang bor because my tang go yum my bor ke bor e dege na ngaro dia kong mimo so mayum ya government is in boy bang I dinamaro gifono
Alhaji Mohammed lead.
Recall that the anti-open grazing law in Akwa Ibom State was enacted in September 2021 when former Governor Dom Emmanuel signed the bill banning the open rearing and grazing of livestock into law after it was passed by the State House of Assembly. In Africa, Ugandan opposition leader Bobi Wine is on the run after police raided his home. Wine, whose real name is Robert Koinlagi, said he escaped the raid and has since been in hiding. He said he is constantly on the move and being housed and protected by the common people. Wine has said his wife and other relatives are under house arrest. The singer-turned-politician was the main challenger to President Yoweri Museveni in last week's presidential election. Official results gave him just under 25% of the vote to Museveni's 72%, but Wine has called the vote blatant theft. Still in Africa, Guinea-Bissau's junta said in a decree published on Wednesday that the country would hold presidential and legislative elections on December 6. According to the decree read by junta leader General Hoita Ntam in front of the press, the announcement comes 2 months after the junta seized power and follows a transitional charter published earlier in December. This bars Ntam from running for election just days after Guinea-Bissau held a presidential election in November. The country's military overthrew President Umaro Sissoco Embalo, who was seeking a second term, and suspended the electoral process. The junta has since appointed Ntam, a close associate of Embalo, as a transitional leader. On the foreign scene, President Donald Trump demanded immediate talks on acquiring Greenland in a hardline speech at Davos Switzerland Wednesday, but says that while the United States possessed unstoppable force, it would not use it to take the Arctic island from Denmark. Trump's quest to take control of Greenland, which he said was needed for national and international security, dominated his address to the World Economic Forum as he returned for the first time in 6 years. But Trump appeared to rule out the threat of military action against fellow NATO member Denmark, which he branded ungrateful, that has threatened to tear the transatlantic alliance apart. Still on the foreign scene, a landslide smashed into a campsite in rain-swept northern New Zealand today, leaving multiple people missing under tons of mud. Mounds of earth buried a sharp block at the site, which lies at the foot of extinct volcano Mount Magwani. According to witnesses and emergency officials, voices were briefly heard calling for help from beneath the rubble. Rescuers used heavy machinery to search for survivors after the disaster, which struck after overnight rain lashed the area on New Zealand's North Island. Still to come in the news. CAF fines Algeria $100,000, suspends players after Nigeria clash. Do stay tuned for details of this and more in a moment.
The family of Obong Engineer Ime Ekanem announces the passing of her father, brother, uncle, late Engineer Ime Ekanem, who passed away at age 71. Funeral arrangements are as follows. Vigil service Friday, January 23, 2026 at Obong Engineer Ime Ekanem Family Compound, Ibiaku Urwan Local Government Area from 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. Saturday, January 24, 2026, body leaves Rumako Funeral Homes, Uyo, to his compound at 8 a.m. Lying in state at Engineer Ime Ekanem's family compound, Ibiaku at 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Funeral service to be conducted by the African Church, St. Philip Parish, Ibiaku Northern Urwan Archdeaconry, Urwan Missionary Diocese. At Ibiaku Community Secondary School Field on Saturday, January 24, 2026 at 10 a.m. Interment follows immediately after funeral service at Engineer Ime Ekanem's compound at 2 p.m. May his soul rest in peace. The family of Obong Engineer Ime Ekanem, announcer.
Welcome back and thanks for staying tuned in. Now to complete the news on this hour. On our business news, Japan's exports to the United States dropped 11.1% in December and slipped more than 4% last year. Official figures showed today as tariffs bite. Finance Ministry data shows that in 2025, Japan's exports to the United States fell 4.1%. contributing to 12.6% decline in Tokyo's trade surplus, with Washington to 7.5 trillion yen, approximately $47 billion. A drop in the number of cars and auto parts exported, as well as rising imports of liquefied petroleum gas, cereals and power-generating machines were primary factors in Tokyo's shrinking trade surplus with Washington, according to the data. Still in business, the Central Bank of Nigeria was expected to conduct its second Treasury bills auction for January 2026 yesterday, offering instruments worth 1.15 trillion naira as strong liquidity in the banking system collides with rising borrowing needs and cautious interest rate expectations. The auction would span the three standard maturities of 91 days, 182 days and 364 days, continuing the Apex Bank's heavy reliance on short-term domestic instruments to fund government operations and manage liquidity. Market participants say the outcome would be closely watched for signals on the direction of short-term interest rates, especially amid mixed inflation trends and sustained monetary tightening. On our health news, the National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control has begun enforcing the ban on the production and sale of alcohol in sachets and PET bottles below 200 ml. The Director General of NAFDAC, Professor Mojisola Deyeye, disclosed this at a media briefing organized by the agency in Lagos. Recall that NAFDAC had on November 11, 2025, announced plans to enforce a total ban on such products by December 2025, in line with the directive from the Senate. However, enforcement was initially halted after the federal government called for an immediate suspension of all action and measures related to the proposed ban, pending consultation and a final directive. Adeyeye said the agency has now received the marching order from the Senate to proceed, and enforcement has already commenced. Still in health, the Cross River State government has introduced compulsory anti-drug clubs in both private and public schools across the state. The State Commissioner for Education, Dr. Stephen Ode, disclosed this in Calabar while briefing newsmen on reforms being introduced in the sector by the current administration. Ode explained that the essence of establishing the clubs was to combat rising drug use among students, noting that anti-drug clubs would monitor and report incidents, raise awareness, and work with authorities to enforce discipline. Now to the world of sports. The Confederation of African Football has handed down multiple sanctions against Algeria and its players following misconduct during and after the Africa Cup of Nations Morocco 2025 quarter-final against Nigeria. The sanctions include the suspension of 2 Algerian players and a series of fines totaling $100,000 over the conduct of the team, officials and supporters. Recall that the incident occurred immediately after the final whistle as the Super Eagles advanced following goals that Algerian players and fans disputed, particularly over an alleged missed penalty call in their favor. Still in sports, Benin's club USCN Cavaliers have sacked their Nigerian coach Usman Abdullah. Abdullah spent only 6 months with Cavaliers before his departure from the club. He was appointed head coach of the mother side in August 2025. Cavaliers are currently in 16th position on the Championate National League table. Recall that the 45-year-old won the Nigeria Premier Football League NPFL title with Enyimba in the 2018-2019 season. On entertainment news, famous American streamer Darren Jason Watkins Jr., also known as Eso Speed, has praised Nigerian cuisine, crowning Nigerian jollof rice the best in the world. Speed joined the debate over which African country has the best jollof rice during his live stream in Lagos on Wednesday. The American content creator, who flew into Nigeria from Senegal, where he streamed the country's AFCON Trophy parade, stated that Nigerian jollof tastes better than Senegalese jollof. And that's all we have for you at this time on this bulletin. Do well to follow us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, all of which you can find on our website, SpectrumTVLive.ng. This has been Spectrum Television News at noon. I am Uyai Imam. Thanks for watching. Good afternoon.